Okay, so continuing with my testimony, in 2014, I know that we're picking up with 2015, but while I was working for Farmers Insurance, um, I was asked to get my um, financial advisor's license. So in December, November, December, October, November, December of 14, um, I tried. You had to pay it. It's a very difficult. The first test is very difficult. I didn't pass 3 times. The first time I got killed. The second time I missed by 2 questions, and then the third time I missed by 1 question, getting enough to get my license. Looking back, I wasn't really too upset about it, but I really did not want to be a financial advisor. But it was something that I had to do. So the night before my third test, was on I can't remember. I think it was a Saturday, and it was a Friday night, and my pastor had all the worship team at his house to, I guess, air out all the differences, all the stuff. Well, I thought it was to talk about direction, to talk about, how where we were going to go, what were some of the expectations. It turned out to be about 3 or 4 hours of just lambasting me for my role as a worship leader, which kind of left me a little distraught. My desires as a worship leader was specifically the presence of God. I didn't care about anything else. It was all about the presence of God, and that's what I wanted. And so, of course, I'm going through my mind all this stuff. I was the brunt of the of all of the grievances that everybody had, and so I took it. I wasn't, I know that I wasn't perfect, but at the same time, wasn't that bad. They asked how come we couldn't have electric guitars and things like that, and and I was like, well, I don't want a rock concert. I don't want Nirvana. I don't want that kind of an atmosphere. Plus, we were a church of around 50 people meeting in a conference room at a hotel where they had asked us to keep the volumes down. So I didn't really see how a major electric influence would have been well for us. So I kept going and kept doing it, and I sat through this thing. And at about 11 o'clock at night, my test was at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning, so I had to get up early, and I was really tired. And I did miss the test by a question, but I knew at that point that there was no backing from anybody, and so I had to lead worship that Sunday, and I just kind of went through the motions. To be honest, I went through the motions. I didn't really care if anybody else entered into God's presence, but I was going to go there. Right or wrong, that was the thing, and that's where I was at emotionally at that time. I failed the test again, and I wasn't going to take it for a third time. So now we fast forward, and I remember. My wife had said, "Do you still want to move to Redding?" This is mid-January, and I said, "Yeah, I would really like to." And I got a call from my sister, and said that my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and he was going to go to the oncologist in about a month to get the details, and so it was rather an emotional time, I would say. Now, while we didn't, we weren't the closest. My dad and we weren't the closest of a family, but at the same time, I loved him. I know that he worked so hard to keep everything for us, and he was always there whether he wanted to be or not. Um, so my dad was, I bought the tickets. I came out in February. Actually, I landed the day after he went to the oncologist. Um, and so I got off the plane. Now, I left Seattle. It was 60 degrees. Landed in Atlanta in the early morning at 30. Came up to New York. Landed in White Plains, New York at 0. It was really cold. Nanook from the north was, he was the only baggage guy, and he was unloading the bags, and I felt so bad for him. There was a ton of snow on the ground. I'm going to say close to 7 or 8 feet of snow on the ground, compacted from this winter, because it was a really, really rough winter. So anyway, I get there, I get in the car. My sister said Dad went to the oncologist, and the oncologist, the only question he had my dad was, "Do you want to know how long you have?" And my dad said no. That was a little strange for me, because my dad was usually, he just wanted to know. So he said he didn't want to know, and so I went, and my dad was a frail of a man. Now, soaking wet with wool clothes on, he would weigh 135 pounds. And that would be with a couple of bricks in his pocket. But this time he was like 78 pounds and skinny and short. He looked like he was shorter too. It was hard to see him in pain. So my sister and I were talking on the way back from the airport, and we were talking about the Lord and other things, and I was praying for my dad, and I was really asking God for wisdom on how to do this. I was asking God for wisdom on how to pray in this realm. I didn't know. I didn't have that answer. Those of you who are familiar with Pastor Bill Johnson and his dad, he had these two teachings. One of them, it was called Enduring Faith. 2 teachings a few days before he died and a few days after he died. That weekend, he shared these 2 teachings about it. And so Enduring Faith, I was, and I was thinking, okay, God, we're going to go after cancer. Cancer took my mom. Cancer took one of my best friends years ago at the age of 26. And I didn't like cancer. Cancer was the first disease that I went after in prayer, and that disease just killed 3 people, the first 3 people I prayed for. So I really didn't know how to do this, but I went and I saw Dad and just saw the struggle he was in. The hospice caregiver was there, and she gave him his medications for the pain, and it was just hard to do. I went and sat with Dad for a long time, for a few, regularly for 2 weeks, and just we sat and talked. We cleared the air of differences, things that we had done together, things that had happened between our family, between the family and all. So I was sitting there, and I kept praying that God would heal him. I kept praying, God, heal this man. I cursed cancer. I sent it back to the devil. Your blood paid for it all. I did all of that, and it was like nothing happened. My dad still struggled, and he was, he still had it, and we're praying. And I remember, one of the days, the whole family was together, and we were all talking to Dad, and he wanted to talk to each of us individually. So he talked to my older brother, and then he talked to me. It was my turn. My sister was the executor of the estate, and so he talked to all of us individually. The last thing my dad said to me before I flew back, and it's actually the last verbal communication I had for him, other than "I love you," he said, "I'm really proud of you. Many people would have given up when you kept going. I mean, inside I was crying. I was trying to stay strong, but I really kind of lost it. That's the first time my dad ever said something emotional to me at any point. Um, but he said he was really proud of me, and that really meant a lot. Um, I didn't know at that point that was going to be the last time I saw him, because I was still praying for healing. Um, so I told my sister. She took me back to the airport. Um, and before I flew back, I said, listen, you got to let me know when you think he's going to pass, or when he passes, you can't just schedule the funeral the next day. The tickets are going to cost a fortune. I need to, even with the discount, which they don't really have a discount for, for this, but they say they do, but it's not. It's it's a death in the family discount that airline's supposed to have, but they don't. I was sitting there and I said, listen, you got to let me know. So we went through the month of March, and I was talking to a realtor at the time, and he said it was going to be about 90 days. So just let him know when I want to put it. And I said, yeah, I think we're going to go, but I just don't know when. So I kind of put everything on hold and all. I talked to a title person, and all of this. So, and I wasn't sure how to resign from Farmers Insurance, because if I was going to move, I couldn't carry my license to California, especially if I was living in Washington State. So, we're here, in the months, and I remember, in this whole process, that I kept calling my sister, how's Dad doing? How's Dad doing? Oh, he's not doing good. He's taking his medications, and he's just kind of out of it. He sleeps a lot. And so it was really, really kind of sad. Well, April comes around, and April 2015 was when Easter Easter was there. So my brother called me and told me that that Dad was not on his medication anymore, that he wasn't feeling any pain. So I was excited. I thought, wow, God's doing some incredible things for my dad. And so Easter came. My nephew's birthday was on the Tuesday after Easter that year. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, my dad passed away. And he went to be with Jesus. My dad was born again. He got saved. I remember years ago I gave him a living Bible paraphrase, so that he could read it, and he ended up giving his heart to the Lord. And so he ended up in heaven, but he never took his medications from Good Friday, from Thursday through the day he died. They took really good care of my dad. The gentleman that was staying at his house at the time, the nurse or whatever he was, the caregiver, he bathed my father, put good clothes on him, and then called about 8 o'clock in the morning. He called the ambulance and called my sister. And then my sister said that the funeral was going to be that Saturday, and I was like, ugh. And I wasn't mad because I had to go, but it was just the money that was involved in the tickets. And so anyway, the tickets were paid for. I was able to go, and it was a sad moment for me. I know that we arrived on Thursday, so I knew on Wednesday we left Thursday morning and flew out there. Got there on we got there on Friday, and Friday in the morning, and then it was a hard day. My dad, he was well liked. Let me just say that people around liked him. My dad's main concern was not his own happiness necessarily, as much as it was the happiness of the people around him. My dad would be the life of the party until he would be the life of the party, and then once everybody was comfortable, and once everybody felt at home, and were enjoying themselves, my dad would back away and let everybody enjoy themselves. And that's kind of like my personality as well. I'm not a really outgoing person, but until everybody gets excited, until everybody's having a good time, I'm pretty much the same way. So in this, I never showed my children my emotions. That's something that I wish I could have back. I wasn't really an emotional person necessarily. I mean, I wore my emotions on my sleeve, and what you saw, you got. I was very rarely ever depressed, except for when I was younger. But I really fought depression, and I just came at it with joy. My dad used to say, worry is like a rocking chair. It keeps you busy. It just doesn't get you anywhere. And so I hardly ever worried, especially after I came to Jesus, because he was amazing. Jesus was just so good. So we went to the funeral. I got to hear some stories about my dad that I had no idea about. I found out that my mom had 13 miscarriages between my oldest brother and my youngest brother. And there's 3 years between my older brother and I, and she had 3 miscarriages between then. She had 10 miscarriages between me and my sister. There's 8 years difference. It's just a crazy thing. I had no idea about that. I started to learn a lot of things about the family. Like my grandfather was not able to go to my mom and dad's wedding because of stuff that was over in Pennsylvania that he had to take care of. So, I learned all this stuff at the funeral, and that's not a big deal. So we fly back on Sunday, and on Monday we put our house up for sale. And as we were putting our house up for sale, remember the realtor said that it's going to take about 90 days to sell the house. So, just be aware of that. And so we kind of felt like we weren't really in a hurry. We were having garage sales, every Saturday to get rid of the stuff we weren't going to take with us. So we put the house up for sale on Monday. We only have it on the internet. We don't have a sign in the front yard. And we had our house up for sale for $20,000 more than the one of our neighbors, who was a couple doors down, had his house up for sale. So that week, the week after that, we had that was that week. We put it up for sale on Monday. That week by Friday we had 10 people walk through the house. We had 4 offers. 2 were serious. One guy was offering $130,000 for a house, and we were like, no, because we wanted $250,000, and we just said no to that guy. But we had 2 serious offers. One gave us the full price. We still ended up losing money on the house, but we knew that that's what God, okay, we sold it in a week. We had to leave by May 15th. That's when they were going to move in. So we had to be out of the house. So we had 30 days to do it. So we left the house. We packed everything. And I remember the day we were leaving, the night before we were leaving. I had gotten the trailer. We loaded it up that night. And I was supposed to leave at 2:45 in the morning. And my wife was going to get up at 5. And I was just going to barely beat her there. And then we were going to unload the truck. Well, we're sleeping on the floor in an air mattress on a single. This is so funny. We were on a twin air mattress, my wife and I, and I'd never do that again. I'll tell you that. I was always on the floor. But I got up. I saw it was 2:45, and I was excited about that. And I was like, "Oh, cool!" I just got up, brushed my teeth, washed off a little bit, and got in the truck and pulled out and moved and started driving down. And I got down to, we were in Tacoma at the time. So I got down to Centralia. And, no, I'm sorry. I got down on the highway, and the clock in the truck said 12:45. Like, almost 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, wait a second, what? And so what happened was the one on our alarm clock was missing. Or it wasn't lit, so I was like, oh no. So I got up at 12. So I just kept driving. Got down to Chehalis area and pulled over into the rest stop, and slept for about an hour, and then continued driving and I was able to make it down to Redding in the early morning hours. It was just one of those things. So I just drove, and I remember having the truck unloaded before my wife came. So that was kind of cool. One of my neighbors came and helped me unload the truck and some of the heavy things. A lot of them were not heavy, but some of them were. So he helped me with the heavy stuff. So we got into the condo that we were staying in, and I got to tell you, it was a surreal. It was very surreal for me. I'm finally at a place, where I don't have to preach. I don't have to do anything. I'm here. I'm in this. I'm in this thing. Now I want to go back as we close here. I want to go back to a time in 1974, 1975, somewhere around there. A friend of mine who had been mentoring me, he was in love with this girl in our church, and I'll keep their names absent here. Anyway, he would, and whenever I had a question, I would call him. Whenever I had issues, I would call him. Because don't forget, before all of this, I was really suicidal. Before I gave my life to Jesus, I was very suicidal. I was lonely. I was depressed. And then so any kind of emotional thing, I had to just do. So he disappears. It was a sad situation, but he disappeared. And I remember he's gone, and I'm like, who am I going to talk to now? And I was like, God, who can I get? I need this guy. And God said to me, and I heard it, I don't know if it was audible or not, but God said, you don't need him, you need me. Now put your trust in me. And so that was a real defining moment for my life. And that helped me through the rest of the years. In the midst of all the discouragements, in the midst of all of the situations I had faced, I don't need him, I need Jesus. And so that'll lead me up to May of 2015, and that's when the story gets good. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys later.